Relative clauses give more information about nouns. For example, she's the teacher who helped me. The relative clause is giving more information about this noun, teacher. Here's another. This is the bike that I want to buy. Here is the relative clause, and here's the noun it's giving more information about. Relative clauses usually begin with a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. We use different relative pronouns and adverbs depending on the type of noun we're referring to. Let's go through when we use each of the relative pronouns and adverbs. We'll start with who. We use who if we're referring to a person. Here's one example. My friend, who is always late, is going to meet us there. And here's another. I want to find the man who lent me his phone. In each sentence, the relative pronoun who is used because the noun the relative clause is giving more information about is a person. Next up is whose. Whose is used if we're referring to a person or thing in possession of something. Here's an example. Ms. Bishop is the teacher whose classroom was flooded. Whose is used because the relative clause is showing possession. It is indicating that the classroom belongs to Ms. Bishop. Here's another example. Joe, whose daughter recently moved overseas, is coming for dinner. Whose is used because it shows the daughter belongs to Joe. Now let's move on to which. We use which if we're referring to an animal or a thing. Which is used if we're adding extra, non-essential information. That is, if we're using a non-defining clause. For example, houses near the beach, which often have great views, are very popular. Which is used to refer to a thing, houses. Notice the information given about the noun in this sentence is not essential. It's just extra information to further describe it. Next up is that. Just like which, we use that if we're referring to an animal or a thing. That is used if we're adding essential information. That is, if we're using a defining clause. For example, houses that are near the beach often have great views. This sentence still refers to houses, a thing, but this time that is used because the relative clause is defining. The information is essential. It is possible to use which with defining clauses. To use this sentence as an example, we could say, houses which are near the beach often have great views. But it is less common, and it's generally best to stick with that. Now we'll move on to where. Where is used if we are referring to a place. Let's look at a couple of examples. I need to find a room where I can work. My dad showed me the house where he grew up. In each of these sentences, where introduces a relative clause that provides information about a place. A room in the first sentence, a house in the second sentence. Next is when. We use when if we're referring to a time. Here are a couple of examples. That was a year when we faced many challenges. Summer, when the weather is warm, is my favorite season. In each of these sentences, when introduces a relative clause that provides information about times, a year and a season, summer. You might have noticed that in the first sentence, the relative clause provides essential information, making it a defining relative clause. In the second sentence, the relative clause is non-defining. It provides additional information not necessary to understand the sentence. Finally, we use why if we're referring to a reason. For example, I can't understand the reason why he decided to move away. The reason why the car crashed is not yet known. In the first sentence, why introduces a relative clause that gives the reason for his decision to move away. In the second sentence, why introduces a relative clause that refers to the reason for a car crash. Now it's time to test how you're going. Use the correct relative pronouns and relative adverbs to complete the following sentences. Pause here while you work. Let's go through them. In number 1, a person is being referred to, so who is needed. The man who visited yesterday is my uncle. We would use when in number 2 because it is referring to a time. That was the moment when I realized. In number 3, a thing is being referred to, a garden. For things, we use that or which. Since this is a defining clause, that is the best choice. This is the garden that was destroyed in the storm last year, although which could also be used. In number 4, we would use whose, because it's referring to a person in possession, a girl and her parents. I met a girl whose parents are from Italy. We need where for number 5 because it refers to a place. This is the park where we used to play as kids. For number 6, we need why because it's a reason. I need to explain the reason why I was late to work. And for number 7, we need which. Our garden, which is full of flowers, is a lovely place to relax. We wouldn't use that here because it's a non-defining clause. Before you finish, challenge yourself to write a sentence for each of these relative pronouns and adverbs, using them in a relative clause. I'd love to see how you go, so leave a few of your sentences in the comments. Thanks for following along. I hope to see you soon for the next lesson. EasyTeaching.net